So this week's episode of Legion, there's not much to say over here when it comes to Easter eggs and when it comes to speculation as to what's gonna go down. I do believe it's become pretty obvious at the moment, and the majority of what we get to find out on this episode is all about reveals. Reveals is stuff that we already kind of figured out, like who's the villain of the season. The villain of the season is David, or that future villain at least, that they are trying to avoid with Rise is actually David. But welcome back, guys. So the majority of this episode was a Melanie and Sid-centric episode. Melanie has been the representative of man-hate throughout the season, and from the very first moment, because from the very first moment of the season that we get to see Melanie, she's been hating so much on every guy there is. All the problems in the world are created by men. That is the message we're getting from Melanie since the beginning of the season. It is also kind of an ongoing message on TV at the moment. For some reason, they have to portray that one person on so many shows. Gotham, for example, Barbara Keane is an example, where you get this character that believes that all the problems, every single one of them, that a woman has to face is because of men. That's the very problem that she does talk about at the very beginning of the episode. But she is under the control of the Shadow King since the very end of episode 8. She's still under the control of the Shadow King, and she is doing his bidding. And that is pretty much the man's endgame. He's trying to ally himself with present-day Sid in the same manner that he's allied himself with future Sid, trying to make sure that David is to be stopped. So pretty much the end game is simple. He gets back his body, and David has got nobody else, nobody left actually, to ally himself with. But to get started though, at the very beginning of the episode, we get to see David from the comics, a nod or an Easter egg to David from the comics. We get to see him with his hair straight up and flat on top. Pretty much that's Legion, David Haller from the comics. But there is as well one other thing of note over here, how Melanie speaks of all the trauma in his life, all the trouble that he's gone through, all the problems that he's had to deal with, the way he's been screwed over and over again, creating this villain. Again, one more hint towards the idea that the personality that would take over, destroy the world, and become the killer of worlds that Melanie speaks of is going to be Lord Trauma, a personality of David in the comics. Now, I've been talking about that for 2 weeks now, so I'm not going to go into details over here because it would be kind of redundant if you've been watching my videos. If not, you can check my videos for the past couple of weeks, and you would see why I'm going in that direction, why I do think this is pretty much a huge possibility. I mean, all the trauma the guy has gone through, Amy included, recently, Amy included, that does hint towards the idea that Lord Trauma is the culprit over here, the future culprit that is. But unless the Shadow King is using Melanie to play mind tricks on Sid, there's a good chance that we know that David is definitely the villain, that we got confirmation. We got to see a glimpse of what he saw when he looked into future Sid's mind. We've also got confirmation that David is willing to go that one extra mile in order to get back Sid. We got confirmation that he's willing to go to the extent of torturing Oliver in order to get information on where Sid is. Where did he take Sid? And he just drills through the man. Now before I move on to what the rest of this episode brought to us, there was this one moment early on where Oliver tells him that I am you, tells David, I am you. For a moment there as well, we get to see David in Oliver's place in that seat, and the thought that comes to mind over here is this all part of David's imagination? Are all of these personalities, or some of them, Oliver included, part of David, part of Legion, a personality of Legion? Did he absorb Oliver at some point? Now for the longest while I've been a fan of this theory, that the majority of these characters, or some of them at least, are personalities of David. I did as well at some point, especially early on this season, lay down the possibility that Cary and Kerry especially are personalities of David. You know, the way they merge with one another and all of that stuff. It did make it seem like they're either personalities of David, or they are possibly a projection of how David's ability to absorb personalities might actually work in the future. But nonetheless, I think this one was all about playing mind games. The Shadow King is playing mind games with David. So this guy we do see tortured at the very beginning of the episode by David is none other than Oliver under the control of the Shadow King. It's all about the mind games and the battle that's already started between the two of them. But moving on, Legion the World Killer kind of reminds me of Quake or Daisy, the Destroyer of Worlds from Season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But nonetheless, this is not really the point. I think the point over here is, this is the very first time, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we do have someone on the show refer to David as Legion. I mean, if we do ignore the title of the series, I think this is the very first time we've heard the name Legion used in reference to David within the events of the series. But moving on, every single week, every single review of Legion, someone has to ask me what you think of the Minotaur, and every single time, every single week I've got to come back empty-handed and go, okay, I have no idea. But however though, this week around I've got a couple of things to state over here. Now we do know that the Minotaur has been very much associated with Melanie since the beginning of the season. We also know that the Minotaur kind of gained his power on this episode from Melanie while she's under the control of the Shadow King. So I tried over the past few weeks to figure out what personality would the Minotaur present out of the comics, either a Legion personality or something else, and I always came back empty-handed. But this week though, Hillbilly Author came with this theory on Discord. So David does have a Centaur personality in the comics. The Centaur is the closest thing that we could think of to a Minotaur. So the Minotaur could be the show's version of that personality, and the Shadow King could have gained control over it while inside David's mind during the events of Season 1. That being said, and before I end this video, let's talk some stray comments over here. Number 1, the tuning fork, it does seem to represent what we usually see in the form of a power dampening collar. Number 2, going back to the pregnancy from last week's episode, the "we are gonna have a prince" pregnancy. Could that be something related or similar to what happened to Kitty Pryde in the comics, as in the pregnancy that ended up being a false one and rather a brood infestation? Number 3, by the very end of the episode, the Shadow King is free, but you could also see the struggle within David. He wants to kill the Shadow King, and he's already enjoying it, enjoying the feeling that he wants to kill him. Number 4, the fainting of Melanie, the moment she gives life to the Shadow King's dead body, does indicate that she's no more connected to him. So chances are, come next week's episode, we're going to see our good old Melanie rather than a Melanie connected to the Shadow King and controlled by the Shadow King. And finally, number 5, Oliver has been tortured by David, but he is as well out of the control of the Shadow King, the realm of the control of the Shadow King. So while David's methods were unorthodox and unlike the David that we know or we've known so far since the beginning of the series, there is a good chance that he did all of this the way he did it in order to break the connection between Oliver and the Shadow King, to save Oliver from the Shadow King. Now David was not really torturing him the usual or the regular way, but rather the psychic way, the psychic kind of torture, and he was doing that across dimensions. The fact that he did it all that way, jumping from one dimension to the other, does put me under the impression that he did it all in order to sever the connection between both the Shadow King and Oliver. So yes, while his initial objective did seem to want the information on Sid, he did still want it. Where is Sid? Where is she? But nonetheless, there was another objective inherent in what he did. He wanted to free Oliver. He wanted no one to be in the way or a casualty of his final showdown with the Shadow King as the season comes to a close. Now, I'm not going to talk much about the trailer of the finale of the season airing next week, but nonetheless, I want to state that it does indicate that a lot of the Legion personalities are going to be coming out. It does seem like at least 2 of them are going to be coming into play. We're going to be seeing a full-on Legion with multiple personalities come next week. But that being said though, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. Let me know if there is anything that I've missed, any Easter eggs, or any little detail that you believe I should have explained in this review. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, and while you're at it, you can always subscribe and enable notifications for my future videos, community posts, and live streams. But until my next video though, thank you all for tuning in, and have a great day.